The one-in-a-billion strike. Phillip Hughes, a world-class athlete, stands at the crease, perfectly focused, only to be collapsed by a freak impact to a tiny, unprotected sliver of his neck. In an instant, a standard game of cricket turns into a desperate medical emergency that would change the sport's safety laws forever. Cricket feels safe. It's a game of white flannels, tea breaks, and polite applause. But at its heart, it's a high-speed physics experiment involving a 5-ounce ball made of cork and leather flying at 90 miles per hour. In 2014, Phillip Hughes was in the zone. He was wearing the best gear money could buy. He looked like he couldn't be touched. Then came the bouncer, a short, aggressive delivery that forced him to duck and turn. The ball missed his bat. It missed his helmet. It found a forbidden gap, a tiny sliver of skin just below the ear. The impact wasn't just a bruise. It was a medical anomaly. The ball hit the vertebral artery with such specific force that it compressed the vessel against his bone and caused it to burst. This triggered a massive brain bleed. Hughes didn't scream or clutch his head. He just leaned over, hands on his knees, and then simply dropped face first onto the grass. The air in the stadium went cold. It was a one-in-a-billion fluke. A collision of anatomy and momentum that proved even the best armor has bugs. Today, players wear stem guards to close that lethal gap. The invisible blade, a routine mid-ice collision, transforms a fast-paced hockey game into a frantic life-and-death struggle as a stray skate blade finds a lethal path. The arena falls into a haunted silence as players and fans realize they've just witnessed a freak accident that defies every safety protocol in the book. Ice hockey is a game of beautiful, controlled violence. It's played on frozen water by men with razor-sharp steel blades strapped to their feet. We worry about big hits or pucks to the teeth. But in 2023, during a game in England, a collision between Adam Johnson and an opponent turned a routine play into a nightmare. As they hit, an opponent's leg kicked up. For a split second, that skate became a swinging guillotine. The blade caught Johnson across the throat. Because the game is so fast, it was almost impossible to see until the red started to bloom on the white ice. The most haunting part isn't the hit. It's what happened next. Johnson actually got up. He tried to skate toward his bench, clutching his neck, his mind probably telling him he could just shake it off. But the blood loss was too fast. He collapsed into a teammate's arms and passed away shortly after. This tragedy started a global push for mandatory neck guards. It was a brutal reminder that the very tools that let you glide can also cut you down in a heartbeat. The 14-round war. A grueling championship bout ends with a fighter pulling himself up the ropes through pure willpower, unaware that his brain has already reached a fatal breaking point. This final display of courage would lead to the immediate abolition of 15-round fights to save future boxers from a similar fate. Back in 1982, boxing was a different world. Championship fights went 15 rounds, a marathon of head-rattling impacts. Koo Kim was a South Korean fighter with a warrior's soul. He flew to Vegas to face the champion, Ray Mancini. For 13 rounds, they traded punches that would have leveled most people. Kim took hundreds of hits, but his will kept him upright. By the 14th round, a silent disaster was happening inside his head. It wasn't one big punch. It was the accumulation. Inside the tight, dark space of his skull, his brain was swelling. With nowhere to go, the pressure began to crush his brainstem. Mancini landed a final right hand, and Kim went down. But he didn't just lay there. He used his trembling hands to grab the ropes, dragging his broken body up, trying to beat the count through sheer force of spirit. He made it to his feet just as the ref stopped it. Then, his lights went out. He died 4 days later. The boxing world immediately cut fights to 12 rounds, realizing that those last 3 rounds were a zone where the human spirit outlives the human brain. The physics of 90 mph. A young Olympian is launched from a high-speed ice track at nearly 100 miles per hour, striking an unpadded steel support beam in a fraction of a second. The incident exposed a catastrophic design flaw that prioritized speed over the basic survival of the athletes competing on the world stage. Luge is a sport of pure nerve. You lie on a sled the size of a lunch tray and slide down an ice pipe at speeds that would get you a speeding ticket. During a practice run for the 2010 Winter Olympics, Nodar Kumatatashvili was pushing the limits on the fastest track in the world. As he hit the final turn, the G-forces were massive. Nodar lost his line by just a fraction of an inch. His sled clipped the rim, and the physics of 90 miles per hour took over. He was launched out of the ice flume like a projectile. In that split second, the forbidden flaw of the track was revealed. The steel support poles holding up the roof were unpadded and sat right in the path of anyone who flew over the wall. He struck a metal beam at full speed. There was no crunch, just a sickening thud. He was gone before he hit the ground. This tragedy forced engineers to rethink the geometry of speed. They realized that at that velocity, safe enough is a lie. The silent pitch in the twilight, in the murky shadows of a 1920s afternoon, a star baseball player stands frozen as a mud-caked ball strikes his temple with a sound loud enough to be heard across the infield. This single, quiet moment in the dirt would eventually force a total revolution in equipment, leading to the helmets every player wears today. In the early days of baseball, the game lived in the shadows. There were no stadium lights. The spitball was legal. Pitchers would scuff the ball with dirt, tobacco juice, and licorice until it was dark, lumpy, and nearly invisible against the twilight sky. Ray Chapman, a star for Cleveland, stepped up to the plate in a murky game against the Yankees. The pitcher, Carl Mays, threw a hard, low Submariner pitch. Because the ball was so dirty and the light was so bad, Chapman never saw it. He didn't duck. He didn't flinch. He just stood there as the ball slammed into his temple. The sound was so sharp that the pitcher actually thought the ball hit the bat and threw it to first base. It wasn't until he saw Chapman slowly sink to his knees, blood trickling from his ear, that the horror set in. His skull was fractured so badly he died the next morning. This is still the only on-field death in MLB history. It's why the spitball was banned, and why helmets became mandatory. It took a tragedy to prove a game of inches shouldn't be played in the dark. The broken neck of Iron Mike Webster, a legendary football player's life, unravels in a haze of confusion and self-inflicted pain long after the stadium lights have gone out. His post-mortem diagnosis would shock the sporting world, revealing that his greatest strength was also the very thing that slowly destroyed his mind. Some sports deaths don't happen in a spray of blood. They are slow-motion disasters that end years after the cheering stops. Mike Webster was the heart of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They called him Iron Mike because he seemed indestructible. He played nearly 250 games at center, the most violent spot on the field, where every play starts with a head-to-head collision. By the time he retired, Mike's body was a wreck, but his brain was the real tragedy. He started losing his mind. He lived out of his car and forgot his kids' names. He got so frustrated with the buzzing in his head that he would use a taser on himself just to knock himself out. He died at 50, looking 80. When doctors opened his skull, they found the forbidden truth: chronic traumatic encephalopathy. His brain was riddled with brown, stagnant proteins that had choked his neurons. He hadn't died from one hit, but from 70,000 micro-disasters over his career. He was patient zero for the concussion crisis. His death stripped away the glory of the NFL and showed the hidden painful price of being iron.